Drishyam Part 3 isn't just another Malayalam movie. It is the ultimate cinematic event the entire Indian film industry has been desperately waiting for. The craze surrounding this franchise is unlike anything else in cinema history. After the mind-blowing responses to Part 1 and Part 2, fans are ready to give Part 3 their 100% support. In fact, early hype suggests Part 3 will completely overshadow its predecessors to become a historic blockbuster. Now, while the movie hasn't officially hit streaming platforms yet, we have pieced together the entire narrative using exclusive trailer cuts and insider storylines. So, grab your popcorn, sit back, and dive into the brilliant, mind-bending world of Georgekutty. Our story kicks off exactly where Drishyam 2 left us. The court has delivered its final verdict. Georgekutty is legally cleared of Varun's murder. Following the trial, Georgekutty handed over Varun's ashes to his grieving parents with a simple note asking for peace. He wanted the nightmare to end. But for a mastermind like Georgekutty, peace is just an illusion. The opening scene of Part 3 takes us inside a crowded movie theater. Georgekutty and his family are watching a film. But here's the brilliant meta-twist. They are watching a movie called Drishyam. Remember in Part 2 when Georgekutty met a writer and pitched a screenplay based on his life? Well, that story has now been turned into a feature film by a prominent director, and the producer is none other than Georgekutty himself. As the credits roll, the audience erupts into applause. The reviews are spectacular, and the lead actor is being praised to the heavens. People are calling it a game-changer for the Malayalam industry. But as Georgekutty's family tries to exit the theater, they find a massive crowd and aggressive media reporters waiting for them. Trying to avoid a scene, they slip out through the back door, but a persistent duo of journalists catches them on camera. The reporters confront Georgekutty. "Sir, just one personal question. 2 years ago, the court ruled you innocent, and DNA reports proved the body wasn't Varun's. Yet your new movie perfectly mirrors your real-life events. What do you have to say about that?" Georgekutty, calm as ever, replies, "The police couldn't solve the case, so they tried to frame me. I only told the truth to protect my family. Once I was cleared, I used my experiences to write a fictional story, that's all." With a polite excuse about guests waiting at home, he brushes past them. But the media team isn't buying it. Seeing his absolute lack of guilt, they vow to dig deeper and reopen the case, completely unaware of who is pulling their strings from the shadows. Back home, Georgekutty's primary focus is finding a groom for his eldest daughter, Anju. However, the shadow of the past looms large. Even though the court acquitted them, local families backed out of marriage proposals the moment they remembered the infamous Varun murder case. Rani is heartbroken, crying over how society refuses to let them live in peace. Seeing her despair, Georgekutty tells the matchmakers to stop looking locally and search for grooms in other regions. Meanwhile, Drishyam becomes a massive box office hit. While the family celebrates, Rani grows anxious when Georgekutty mentions making another movie. She begs him to stop, wanting nothing more than to marry off Anju and live quietly. The next day, panic strikes again. Georgekutty's younger daughter, Anu, discovers that their hit movie has been leaked on YouTube. Georgekutty immediately contacts the film's lead actor, and they head to the IG office to file a cyber copyright complaint. While waiting at the IG office, Georgekutty encounters a retired police officer who was part of the original 2013 investigation. The officer makes casual conversation, asking about the family and praising the movie. But then his tone shifts. Looking straight at Georgekutty, he whispers, "I don't know if what you did to Varun was right or wrong, but I know it was pure self-defense." Georgekutty remains completely silent. He knows that in his world a single slip of the tongue can destroy everything. The officer asks Georgekutty to give his aspiring actor's son a break in his next film, which Georgekutty readily promises before heading into his meeting. But the real threat is closer than he thinks. Remember Jose from Part 2? The man who saw Georgekutty leaving the unfinished police station building where Varun's body was hidden? Jose suddenly shows up at Georgekutty's house, accompanied by his wife, broken and guilt-ridden. He confesses that the police paid him to testify falsely in court, and ever since his life has been plagued by bad luck and failing businesses, he begs for forgiveness. In a surprising display of empathy, Georgekutty tells Jose he holds no grudges. In fact, Jose's contradictory statements actually helped close the case. Showing his trademark generosity, Georgekutty offers to fully fund Jose's struggling bakery. But while Georgekutty is playing the savior, the media reporters are closing in. They keep a 24/7 watch on his house, desperate for a loophole. Why are they so obsessed? Because behind them is a dangerous figure seeking absolute vengeance. To escape the crushing stress, Georgekutty takes his family on a vacation. Anju is still deeply traumatized, undergoing intensive psychiatric therapy. During a candid family discussion on their trip, Anju asks the ultimate question: is this case truly over, or can we still get into trouble? To give them definitive peace of mind, Georgekutty reveals he brought their defense lawyer along on the trip. The lawyer explains that while a case can legally be reopened if groundbreaking new evidence emerges, all existing evidence in their case has been permanently destroyed. He reassures the girls, if the past ever catches up, just trust your father. He has sacrificed everything for you and will never let harm touch you. Later that night, the lawyer privately asked Georgekutty why he never told his family that he completely dissolved Varun's body in acid. Georgekutty replies that the truth would only terrify them further. When they return, the matchmaker brings an alarming update. Someone from their own circle has been intentionally sabotaging Anju's wedding proposals by calling prospective grooms. Georgekutty pulls strings with his contacts to trace the phone number, and the location leads straight to his own theater manager, the man who served as the watchman in Part 2. Confronted and slapped by an enraged Georgekutty, the manager spits back, "You ruined another family for your own happiness. You are selfish." Devastated but resolved, Georgekutty tells the matchmaker to look for foreign-settled grooms. Shortly after, a young woman named Shreya, the daughter of the gravedigger who helped Georgekutty swap the skeleton in Part 2, comes to seek his blessings for her upcoming wedding, thanking him for secretly funding her education. Unbeknownst to them, the reporters spy on this meeting. That very night, Georgekutty notices flashlight beams in his garden. He rushes out to find a freshly dug empty hole. As he turns around, his worst nightmare stands before him. Sahadevan, the brutal, ruthless police officer from Part 1, is back, and the female reporter leading the crusade against Georgekutty? She is Sahadevan's own daughter. The game is officially back on. Sahadevan and his daughter begin executing a vicious plan. Sahadevan corners Anju's psychiatrist, threatening his life to force him to alter her medical records to make her look criminally unstable. The terrified doctor complies, but secretly alerts Georgekutty. When Georgekutty confronts Sahadevan and his daughter, Sahadevan throws down an icy challenge. Sensing imminent danger, Georgekutty rushes the preparations for Anju's wedding as a perfect groom from an affluent background is suddenly found. The groom's family accepts Anju despite her past, and the wedding is finalized. Meanwhile, Sahadevan goes rogue. He tracks down Shreya and her paralyzed father, brutally beating them until the father cracks and confesses, "Yes, I helped Georgekutty get a body from the church graveyard." Armed with this devastating confession, Sahadevan takes the evidence to IPS Officer Thomas. But Thomas reprimands him for illegal harassment, revealing that Shreya has already filed an official complaint against Sahadevan. And now the curtain rises on the ultimate mastermind behind this grand conspiracy. The person funding Sahadevan, the reporters, and the entire operation is none other than Varun's father, Prabhakar. Prabhakar reveals that despite performing Varun's final rites, his wife Geetha is completely broken. He declares, "We lost our son and are living in hell. I will never allow his killers to marry off their daughter and live in bliss." Thomas, moved by his grief, agrees to help them bring Georgekutty down. Their immediate goal is to arrest Anju on her wedding day, but Georgekutty, always 3 steps ahead, secures anticipatory bail for his family beforehand. The lawyer convinces the court that the police are merely trying to disrupt a wedding, allowing Anju's marriage to be beautifully completed. That night, Anju and her new husband check into a luxury resort, and this is where Drishyam 3 delivers a blow that no one saw coming. Anju's new husband is actually Prabhakar's undercover operative. Prabhakar had bailed him out of a massive financial crisis abroad on one condition: marry Anju and destroy Georgekutty's family. Inside the resort room, the husband slips a sedative into Anju's drink, knocking her out, and begins staging a gruesome murder scene. The plan is to frame Anju for her husband's murder while he flees the country, ensuring she goes to prison for life. Sahadevan calls Georgekutty from a burner phone, taunting him, "We have your daughter." Georgekutty storms the resort. Seeing his unconscious daughter and the trap laid out, Georgekutty realizes he has only minutes to flip the script. He wakes Anju up and asks her, "Do you trust me?" When she says yes, Georgekutty does the unthinkable. To make the scene look like Sahadevan brutally assaulted her instead of her husband, Georgekutty inflicts injuries on his own daughter, crying through the pain, and instructs her to play dead. Before Anju's husband can escape with Sahadevan, Georgekutty ambushes Sahadevan, beating him savagely. He holds a knife to his throat and forces him to record a video confession detailing the illegal framing, explicitly naming Prabhakar and IPS officer Thomas. With this atomic piece of leverage, Georgekutty corners Thomas and Thomas's superiors. "If you move against my family, this video goes straight to the High Court, and all of your careers and lives are over," Georgekutty warns. But Georgekutty knows this endless cycle of cat and mouse must end. Echoing his profound words from Part 2, that he must eventually face punishment for his sins to truly protect his family, Georgekutty steps forward and voluntarily confesses to Varun's original murder, taking absolute blame for everything to shield his daughters forever. 15 years later, the infamous case finally closes. The entire state stands stunned by the sheer lengths a father went to protect his family. In the final scene, Prabhakar and Geetha watch Georgekutty's arrest on television. Prabhakar turns to his wife and asks, "Are you finally at peace now?" But Geetha looks at the screen with cold, unyielding eyes and whispers, "No, I still want her." Meaning she still wants Anju destroyed. The screen fades to black, leaving a massive, chilling cliffhanger that sets up an explosive premise for Drishyam Part 4. What an absolutely mind-blowing storyline. Georgekutty proved once again why he is the ultimate cinematic mastermind, but with Geetha's chilling final words, the war is far from over. What did you think of this epic plot for Drishyam 3? Do you think Georgekutty will break out of prison in Part 4, or is this truly the end of his brilliant run? Smash that like button if this story gave you goosebumps. Subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping movie breakdowns, and leave your theories in the comments below. See you in the next video.